Welcome, everyone, to Downtime. My name is 𝗦𝗸𝗆. Thank you so much for joining us. And we have with us today Lance McMillan. Lance, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Well, no, not really.
Yeah, your camera's off, but I may in this case actually be doing you a considerable favor. Let me.
Hopefully the fever won't rise to
yeah. So, oh well, I'm glad you could make it. Although you were saying you'd be sick either way, so now you get to be sick on stream. Oh dear Lord. Well, it's been an interesting week. They caught the guy, presumably the guy, but they caught the guy who presumably is behind the leaks. I mean, that's a lot of different kinds of leaks, and a lot over for just one guy who's a 21-year-old guy. I got to tell you, I got questions. But actually, before we get into that, real quick, yeah. So tomorrow, Operator Starsky at 3. We're moving it to 3, and thank you for. I had thought that was the time that the one was actually the latest he could do it. Turns out he preferred later. I prefer later, so we're going to do 3, and that was McMillan was just like, Starsky, if we move it back a bit, do you think you might make it easier for you to be on time? He's like, oh yes, please. I was like, dude, he was the one who wanted 1. I'm throwing him under the bus. He was the one who wanted 1, but okay. So I'm glad you asked. So 3 o'clock. Well, I'm glad you thought of it. So and then we've got, let's see, next week on Saturday, so a week from this coming Saturday, we are going to have our Ukraine charity fundraiser. The highest super chat's going to get the Afghan, not a Afghan, the Afghan. Learned that lesson the hard way. Not making that mistake again. And so, picture of old man. No. Once was enough. My humiliation must have an end point. Besides, I'll find more. You'll have new ways to embarrass me in 5 minutes anyway, I'm sure. So, hey, believe me, that's the only way I can keep my head above water. Just every chance I get, I'm going after you. I was going to do an introduction with hippos and the whole 9 yards, but I was like, try to be a little classy. So, anyways, but we are getting a lot of good guests on. We're still in talks with Ukraine Matters. He is a combat medic. He's been on the front lines. He's a volunteer. Oh dear Lord! And I got a sound check from you real quick, Lance. I can.
A gray jacket when I'm saying this. Can you hear me now?
All right. Sorry. It looks like you were muted to the outside, so I just.
Yes, I was.
Oh, all right.
I figured people would not want to listen to me coughing. So.
Okay. So, all right. If somebody in the live chat, I'm actually not in the live chat. I should probably get something in the live chat to let me know, or Titan's been letting me know. So that's good. So we're going to try to get Ukraine Matters. I think he's a really interesting guy, and I would like very much to see what he has to say on Ukraine too. A number of these people that we're going to be getting for,
cool.
Yeah, I think that'll be awesome. They're still saying you're muted.
That would be cool. Did that come through?
Everything on the board here says that you're coming through, but apparently they are not hearing. So I do have.
I'll do the show in semaphore.
All right. So let me do this. I'm going to just quickly get to the live chat so that I can spares Titan having to bounce everything over to me and, and let me know what's going on. I can just see it as it's happening in the live chat. I do apologize. And oh well, there's a couple of ways to fix it, but I'm going to get into the live chat first. And besides, I have a sneaking suspicion a whole bunch of people are going to be making fun of me, so I want to see what they're saying.
As well they should. As well they should.
I'm so glad you're muted and they can't hear you. Believe me, this is completely by accident. I don't know. We have a new producer. His name is Nick. And you know, it's just he's yeah, we've been having internet issues. It's not the show. It's part of yeah.
Weird.
All right. So, well, that's sort of my other concern is there's a lot of lag, and so my concern is that if we can end up fixing it, and then, oh, they're saying you're no longer muted, so I think the sound has been fixed. It's
Yay.
just yeah, yay! I'm delighted.
They can listen to the dog barking in the background. Hey, let me in. I'm starving. I only ate 2 hours ago.
We now have, so we have booked Anna from Ukraine. She's got a delightful channel where she's been covering the war from, and we've spoken with her. I've spoken with her on the shills, and with Starsky. She is just on the Belarus border, so she's actually got a very interesting perspective from there, and her channel has kind of a different approach to all right, thank you, Titan. Has a different approach to how she's covering the war, so we're going to be talking to her. And she, we also have Anastasia is going to be coming on. She's been through a lot, and so we're going to be talking to her. She's going to be on for our charity stream as well. We're still trying to get Ukraine Matters Combat Medic. We've talked to a few others, and the biggie, I think, is, and I've got to tell you, I've forgotten his name. Oh dear Lord, the NATO commander of the ground forces, General Hodges. General Hodges. We're going to be getting General Hodges. He's going to be, I think right now, he said he can make the May 2nd. He is a general. He went on to command the ground forces for NATO. So he's obviously a big wig. He's been covering Ukraine himself. We should be having him on for May 2nd. I am really looking forward to that one. I think the two of us are just going to have a lot to talk about. I've been following his Twitter feed for a while, and he's plugged in, as one would imagine if he's a former commander in NATO. So a lot going to be going on over the next month. A lot of good people booked, and I think the fundraiser is going to be a lot of fun. About 4 to 6 hours starting April 22nd. That's Saturday, starting at around 1 p.m. Eastern. We're going to have on all of those people, and a few more of the shills I know are going to be joining us for a little while. Sorry, there's nothing I can do. Somebody gave them the key to the back room, so they can just come in at will. I don't know what happened there. So I was trying to, like, here's a key. It's a little outdated. Oh no, we already got the key. Oh, crap. So they're going to be on. What can I say? Dick better be in the live chat. It's no fun making fun of Dick if he's not in the live chat. So that's it. So I think it's going to be a good show. Hope you guys will join us, and everything is going to go to the UN Refugee Relief Fund for Ukraine, which I think is obviously a very good cause. You will get, whoever has the highest super chat is going to get the Afghan, and a letter from Operator Starsky and from myself on behalf of In Time, thanking them for their donation, and all the super chats, highest, lowest, all going to go to the UN. So hopefully that's going to, hopefully we're going to do some good there. I think that's going to be a good show. All right, so let's see what else is going on. I am very scatterbrained today, so you'll have to squirrel. Sorry.
Yeah. I think the big news today was that they made an arrest in the case of who'd been leaking information, all those documents that hit the air a few days ago. Apparently it's some E2, E3. They weren't very specific. They just called him an airman, Air National Guard guy. And he was basically posting all this stuff on his Discord link for some game. I think it was Minecraft, actually. So a game that literally has nothing to do with military operations. But, you know, this is a case of, ooh, look at me. I'm important. I have access to information. Yeah, well, now you're going to have interesting access to, you know, a big beefy roommate who convinces you that you may have done something wrong.
So what was this? Was this just a? I mean, okay. So when I first saw this, I said there has to be more to this because I can't believe that he would have access to not only that level of information, but that broad a scope of information on such a wide variety of topics from U.S. intelligence, who we're spying on, what we're giving to Ukraine. I mean, that is a large breadth of information.
Yeah.
So it's both the level and the breadth. And is the thinking at this point that he was just that he was bragging? He was just like, you know, hey guys, look who's got the biggest cock in the room. To, by the way, complete strangers ostensibly in Minecraft games. Is that what the fuck he was doing? Yeah. Oh dear Lord.
Yeah. So, stand by, chillins. Daddy gonna tell you a real weird story. More than you ever wanted to know about classified material.
Before you do, I just want to point out one thing, which is there are people that I can think of right now that question my maturity on a regular basis. They know who they are. You have not well, that's why I like to have you on. All of a sudden, I look so much better by comparison. But I'm just saying to those people who might happen to be watching, see? Anyways, I'm sorry. So please tell us about nobody in particular. Absolutely nobody, and I mean not a single person in particular. Please continue.
Sure. And I'm perfectly willing to be flame straight. I know sometimes I say things I probably shouldn't. So let's start with the fact that the information that was leaked is kind of all across the board. So in the U.S. government, there are essentially three, and we'll call it a half, levels of security clearance. There's confidential, secret, and top secret. The half is a subcategory of top secret. We'll talk about that in a second. So the bulk of the information that seems to have been leaked is confidential information. And to be honest, most confidential information, A, virtually everybody has access to it, and B, the information that's classified as confidential is often available in open source material. So if you're just somebody who's smart that reads, you know, newspapers, follows different news broadcast channels online or even on, you know, the airwaves, that kind of stuff, you'll have a fairly good knowledge of what would be being discussed in a confidential setting. The next level up is secret. Secret is more restricted, but it's also, again, a lot of people have secret level clearances. It's a little tighter control, but a lot of people have them. Now, the fact that this guy was a very junior enlisted person would suggest to me one of two things. Either A, he didn't have access and got hold of the documents through illicit means, or he had a job which gave him limited access and he kind of exploited that to get more. And the reason I say that is because some of the documents that were leaked are top secret. And top secret material tends to be much more tightly controlled. You kind of have to log in every time you access it to do work with top secret material. You have to account for it very specifically when you're done with it and you're discarding it. So there are very rigid protocols that need to be followed to destroy top secret material.
Just out of curiosity, if I can interrupt real quick, would it be permissible to take either top secret or even top secret compartmentalized information, say, home with you?
For 99.9% of the people in the military, no.
If you're president of the United States, say.
Well, he's not military, but yeah, there are a few people that probably have the required security protocols and safes and so forth in their homes where they could do work on documents and then lock those up. Very, very, very small set of people. We're probably talking, 3- and 4-star flag officers and maybe, an occasional colonel who works in the most sensitive intelligence areas. And that's where we transition into that half category, and that's called special compartmented information. Special compartmented information is just way, way above top secret. It's still classified as being top secret, but every compartment, every little program within the SCI is something you have to be read into, which means you're advised on what it is, how much you can look at it, where you can look at it, and don't talk to anybody except these 5 people on the list of who you can talk to, kind of thing. And that stuff is, if you look at it, you have to sign a piece of paper saying you looked at it. If you destroy it, not only do you have to record when you destroyed it, you have to have a witness that says, yeah, it was destroyed, I saw him destroy it, etc., etc. Very, very tightly controlled stuff. And I'm not trying to brag here, because I know there are people that like to brag, oh, I had SCI level clearance. I just did, because that was part of the performance of my duties. But I know, even though I was read into a number of programs, there were probably dozens, if not hundreds of compartments that I was not read into, so I had no idea what they are. The names themselves of those compartments are classified. So I can't tell you that, Orange Tangerine is a program that's SCI controlled, because that itself is compromising information about it.
So just having that level of clearance doesn't mean you can walk into one where you haven't been read in and just say, oh, I've got this clearance and I was browsing for secrets I didn't know about just because I'm curious.
No.
Yeah, okay.
No, SCI material is kept in what's called a SCIF, SCI facility. It's a special, essentially a hardened bunker with a Faraday cage in it, in the construction, so you can't monitor communications into and out of the place. There are no phone lines. Whenever you go in, you have to surrender your cell phones, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Very, very high-level protocol stuff. And I remember when I went into one of the SCIFs in my last job, I'd walk in and they'd have to announce that I was coming in. Understand, I was the operations director for that organization. So I was the guy who was controlling all the day-to-day operations. So I needed access to this information. When I walked into the SCIF, everybody in the SCIF had to close the folders they had open that they were working on, because I wasn't cleared to see that particular information.
Wow.
That's how sensitive this stuff is. Yeah. So fortunately, as far as we can tell, none of the information that was compromised by these leaks was SCI. But we know there's at least 1 or 2 documents that are TS, top secret. Now, what those are, I haven't pulled the thread to figure it out, but since we know that some of the stuff that was being talked about in this was who we were spying on, in other words, were we spying on, for example, Zelensky or the Poles or, our allies? And we have to be honest, we spy on our allies. Our allies spy on us. It's the way countries do business. You're protecting your own interests. So,
may I interrupt?
Go ahead.
Real quick? So, and also, so let me
Absolutely.
just, I want to just frame that for 1 second. So, is it fair to say that in general it is commonly accepted as well that we spy on our allies spy on us. We usually have some tolerance for it as long as it doesn't go too far, and that the bigger issue in a case like this isn't that the spying was happening, but that we may have inadvertently, if we lost control, if we spy on Germany, on France, and we learn something of theirs, and then we lose control of it. Is that perhaps more of a diplomatic issue than the spying in and of itself?
That's both a diplomatic issue, but perhaps more importantly, it's an intelligence issue, because we share huge amounts of information with our allies, and they share huge amounts of information with us. I won't get into specifics, but there are certain nations that we know have far superior intelligence networks and sources in certain regions of the world than we do. So we heavily rely on them to tell us what's going on in those regions. Conversely, since we have areas where we have a lot more expertise, Central and South America, we share that information with those allies, so they're aware of what's going on. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So when TS material like this leaks, everybody gets worried because it potentially compromises what are called sources and methods. So it may not say, our spy, Joe Klotz, who works in the Prime Minister's office, told us this. That's all carefully edited out, so you don't get that. But it will simply say a highly placed source in that country's political system told us X. And it's not too hard for counterintelligence agencies, by tracking that kind of stuff, to be able to home in on determining who is that agent. And we don't want to compromise our agents. Conversely, we don't want to compromise our allies' agents. Excuse me. The same thing that's going on is that when we do an honest assessment for ourselves, we may say, yeah, we think that the people who are saying, yeah, the Ukrainian spring offensive is going to, sweep all the way to Moscow, we think they're really out of touch with reality. We suspect they will make small localized gains in certain key areas, but we will not see anything approaching the level of gains they made in Kherson and Kharkiv last year. And that's a bit embarrassing for the Ukrainians, because they want to be seen as, able to reclaim their homeland and everything. And we're basically, if that information leaks out, it's embarrassing them. And it's basically saying we don't have a lot of faith in their capabilities, which embarrasses us. So all of that together puts a lot of people in uncomfortable situations.
There was an Israeli spy working for Mossad that is one of their most famous spies. And if I recall, that's sort of how he got busted. And he knew that some of the methods had been leaked and that the Iranians had it. And it turned out to be enough that by process of elimination, they could figure out who the spy was. And when he was going back for basically his final, they asked Mossad asked him to go back one more time, and he went back one more time, and they busted him, not because they actually got his name, but because they had figured out enough about how it was done to figure out who it had to be.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the same one you're thinking of, but if you have access to Netflix, I hate being a shill for a company, but there's a movie on Netflix, I believe it's called The Angel. I could be wrong. There are two of them, but anyway, one of them is about an Israeli agent who got into literally the top levels, absolute top levels of Syrian political, social, and military circles, and was just providing tons and tons of information. And I hate to say almost predictably, Mossad kept saying, no, we need more, we need more. And I think at the end, he kind of knew whatever it was they were asking him to do was going to compromise him and he'd be killed. But because he was a dedicated agent, he went and did it. And sure enough, he got arrested and executed. So it's a deadly business.
So somebody is pointing out here, so let's see, is it Mitch Ashdown? The lack of intel about Russia in those leaks is a concern. Actually, I think in the very first batch, didn't we learn that the U.S. had actually compromised the FSB more than people had known? I don't know how much we had. How much of that do you know about?
There were allusions to that fact. It didn't say specifically what it was, but even that allusion is enough for the FSB to turn inward and search through itself to find who's the bad guy. So that's probably on the table right now. So agents who are working for us may well be eliminated because of this leak.
There's going to be a whole bunch of people just vanishing. It's going to be more open windows incidents, but in this case, it's going to be the good guys. All right. Well, so I'm looking forward to finding out how he got all this stuff and how they busted him so quickly. I always get a little nervous.
Well, my speculation. So let's answer the second part of your question first. How did they identify it? Well, because they were showing documents. Okay, it wasn't information that somebody typed into an email and said, this is what I know. It was pictures of the documents that had been taken. It's kind of easy to backtrack with those documents to figure out where they came from. And once you do that, it's not too difficult to identify who had access at some point or another. Now, my guess is that this guy name escapes me. This guy probably was not somebody who was using the intel, because for the most part, if you're going to be working in intelligence, you'll have a higher rating than E2 or E3. So my guess is he's, for lack of a better description, he's kind of like the janitor. And somebody handed him a bag of classified information, said, take this down to the shredding facility and destroy it. And so he dutifully walked off, and when he got in the shredding facility where there was nobody monitoring what he was doing, or maybe there was, but they weren't paying close attention, he just, stuffed something into his shirt and off he goes. So, whenever I ran destruction of classified material operations, because you have some shredders, but they're not capable of handling the huge volume of material that you typically generate on, say, a ship or a large shore command, or the Air Force Air National Guard base this guy was at. You typically accumulate all of these bags of classified information, and then once a month or something, you load them in the back of a van or a pickup, and you drive down to the destruction facility, and you feed them into the shredder, or you feed them into the incinerator, and it all goes away. And each bag is numbered, and somebody's standing there checking off the bags as they go on. Yep, bag number 73, destroyed. So either they sent this guy down by himself, or somebody who was with him to allegedly supervise was out flirting with somebody in the office. Who knows? 1,001 things going on. So he had access and was able to secret out some of these documents, which he then took pictures of and posted online.
Driving in Luton asked, or pointed out, it's worse than that, in my opinion. If you hear the interviews from Norman Schwarzkopf, the Gulf War was on a string and a prayer. I'm not sure I'd go with that, but I think, okay, well, let me finish, because I think let me finish. If if it was not for bad morale in the Iraqi army, I guess we're saying is that there'd have been a lot more trouble, and I think that's a defensible statement. But this leak gives Russia morale, and is that the case? Do you think? Okay, so but how effective is that going to? I mean, it might give some morale, but here's the thing: they're all used to being lied to by their government anyway. If their government says, "Well, we just got all these classified documents from," Russia, are people going to assume, oh, wow, what a coup, we just got all this information? Or are they going to say, well, maybe we didn't, because they get fed so many lies all the time anyway?
Well, it's a combination. Among other things, we know that in a lot of places in these documents, there's been selective editing of some of the data. So, for example, one of the things was casualty figures, and when it had said something like there were 61,000 Russian casualties during this period or whatever, somebody had gone in and rather clumsily, to be honest, switched the digits so it was 16,000 as opposed to 61,000. And conversely, elements of that particular slide or report that had estimates of Ukrainian casualties were also flipped so that they would make it look like the Ukrainians had suffered far larger losses than they actually had. So I think it's fair to state that the FSB is the one who kind of leaked this stuff, or I won't say leaked it, but promulgated it around the world and made a big deal of it because it fits their narrative, both convincing other states that they're doing well, Ukraine is doing poorly, that they're winning, the Ukrainians are losing. We're going to have to mobilize more of you so we can win this war before it's too late. But we need everybody behind the regime, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not sure I'd say it enhances their morale. I'm sure it does to some extent, but I think the big thing it does is it taints the water of international diplomacy of countries that may already be kind of predisposed to side with the Russians. Now they have documentary evidence that suggests that, it's going much better than we have been told by all these Western sources.
Well, and of course, by doing that, they've done exactly what we try to avoid doing, which is, I have to believe that's how we found the guy, right? We saw the pictures of the documents, and we said, okay, these documents could only have come from so many places, and they're kept strict track of enough that we know, essentially what the chain of custody would have been up through the attempted destruction of these things. So if they hadn't done that, they'd have kept getting intelligence. So they must have thought that from a morale perspective, they would be getting more than they'd be losing in losing the potential source, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it's also safe to say that while Airman, whoever he is likely to be having a visit in Club Fed for an extended period, other members of his chain of command are likely to see their careers destroyed as well, because it was incumbent on them to make sure a situation like this never developed. And the fact that it developed like this in such an egregious way, there's going to be a lot of finger pointing and say, sorry, Colonel, not only are you never going to make general, but we think it's time for you to retire right now.
Yeah, so I'd seen someone ask this earlier. What do you think? Okay, he's a 21-year-old male. He's ergo an idiot. And if he's bragging about these things to complete strangers on the internet, just to whatever, and we've all seen this kind of behavior. I've just never seen it with classified information. How much is that going to help him, and how much is it just going to be, sorry, it's, I can't fathom you'd get him on treason because he didn't profit from this, other than, maybe boost his cred with... Not that we're aware of he didn't profit from it. I think what is likely to happen is he will get probably a sentence in the vicinity of 6 months to 2 years.
And he may do perhaps a third or a quarter of that at, say, Leavenworth, which is the military prison, before being transferred into the civilian side. Because the military typically doesn't like to hold people in military prison for an extended period, except under unusual circumstances. I don't think they're going to come down like a ton of bricks, but they are going to make his life bad, and he's going to really wish he'd been a little more intelligent about what he'd done.
Well, and to be fair too, you have to send the message out that also idiocy is not a defense, and what he did cannot be tolerated. I assume, so.
Yeah, and I hate to do this because it's not something I like to say, but this is one of those, the millennials kind of thing. Because when you grow up with all that kind of electronic social media communication, you don't really think through what you're saying on there, because it's just like, you're having a private conversation with your buddies. It never really enters into the brain that, dude, literally anybody can see what you're posting. And I think that probably what bit him here is he was having, a my dick is bigger than your dick thing with somebody on Discord saying, I know more because I have access to this information. And then he showed it, and then, it spread like wildfire, as things on the internet are like to do.
Which, of course, anybody who saw that, who had half a brain, realized that he was screwing him. That so rare, that kind of thing almost never impresses people, because when they see that, they're usually smart enough to realize, like, yeah, you may have access to it, but you're too stupid to realize you shouldn't be giving it to me. Oh, dear Lord. The other thing, it reminds me, and this was just, it's different. I'm interested to see how it shakes out, but I have noticed, whether it's millennials or not, I don't know. I haven't taken a formal study of, but certainly in sort of the younger generation, one of the things I've noticed is, the ubiquity of information and how much, sort of personal stuff they're willing to say to everybody. And to, of course, my generation, it's like, that can really be used against you. And what I'm realizing is, I think there's still truth to that, but there's less truth to that than there used to be. I was teaching high school. I was in the teacher's cafeteria, or it was a lounge, and we were sitting there, and one of the teachers got really upset because one of the girls had posted nudes somewhere. Forget where. I want to say Facebook, but I don't think they let you post nudes on Facebook. At any rate, and they're like, "Oh my God, that's it." Doesn't she realize she's just, murdered her career? Doesn't she just realize, when she tries to get a job, they'll find them? They may or may not. Right now, they look for those things, and we've all heard stories of they find it and then you get fired. But the reality is, like, everybody in this generation is doing shit like that. So it's sort of like, hi, prospective employee, whoever, thank you for coming. Now, we did a search on the internet and found that you've never posted nudes on the internet. Is there a reason? Are you extra shy? Is there something we should know about? It's like, it's going to be, it's going to be the exception. And
my wife is very, very sensitive to internet security, because not only is she a teacher, but she's also a union organizer for the teachers here. And there are a lot of real wacko right-wing types who have been going out of their way to search through the backgrounds of teachers and post things to get them fired, because they only want good Bible-fearing people to get into the teaching profession. So she's very, very conscious about them, does a very careful job of self-censoring anything she's posting. And my son, so she's briefed my son about this, and his attitude is like, yeah, so what?
I know.
Dude, you're going to be an engineer. You could be working for the government handling classified material. Maybe doing some of the stuff you're doing is really not a wise move. Nobody's going to care. Sure, they aren't.
Yeah, well, I'm curious because if enough of them do it, it's just going to be. I don't know. I will say this. Um, so yeah, I was a teacher for a while. I'm still licensed. I can still teach high school and middle school. But I was thinking about at one point going back, and the other thing is, it's just like there is so much content on. You can't go online for any extended period of time without people. And Hillary Clinton is the best example of this. Whether you like Hillary Clinton or not,
Yep.
she clearly was hosed in so many ways and was still phenomenally successful. But people really thought she was running that porno ring out of the basement of a. I mean, that was everywhere. And it's like, okay, because she is who she is, that's not going to affect her job prospects going forward. But if you say that about somebody and it stays out there forever, who wants to become a teacher, who wants to do whatever else, it's like they will find it.
Yeah, and doesn't have a bevy of high-priced lawyers available to call on to deal with the issue.
Yeah, it's an interesting problem. So, and I've just been sort of aware. It's like I look at the body of stuff on YouTube that I've been involved in one way or another. Most of it, I think, is really quite good. But nobody's perfect. So I'm just sitting there going like, just the wrong thing said at the wrong time or pulled out of context. Like if I ever said something stupid like why I love sweatshops, and somebody pulled that out of context, I could be in a lot of trouble. So, all right. Well, thank you very much for that. I know I think we're both. You're battling an illness there. I think I'm coming down with something. Everyone else in my family's got it, so it's just like, oh fuck, I'm gonna.
Don't do that.
Yeah, try not to, but we're all in a closed space. But so I'm glad we were able to have you on. And I think we're So anything else that was going on that you thought we should cover? I know Isandring wanted to cover. I'm bummed he couldn't make it tonight. I asked him to come on. We were supposed to do a show yesterday. A lot was going on yesterday, so we couldn't do it. But
there are a number of Ukraine things that I'd talk about, but since we're going to have Starsky on tomorrow, I'll save those for that.
I think that's a good idea.
I know there have been, since last we spoke, at least 2, possibly 3 mass shooting events. But, oh no, we can't, have any serious conversation about gun control. And if we do, we have to, throw those evil libertards out of office for daring to suggest that we should do something about it.
Oh, Isandring has been losing his shit over the expulsion of the 3 House members in Tennessee, because he's just like, excuse me, he's just like, then when they get in power, they're going to do it to us. He's just like, you can't, and I feel bad for him. How bad I feel is limited, because okay, he's a conservative. It's like, no, but I'm sitting there going like, I have seen the far left do some outrageous shit that I was going to say I disagree with. No. I know for a fact is not only morally irreprehensible, but actually damages the causes that they claim to fight for, which is why in many cases, I think the people on the furthest left, especially self-appointed to speak for X, Y, or Z minority, it's been my experience.
Why do you keep staring at me while you're saying that? Accusingly, even.
Okay, hold on a second. All right. So as I was saying,
there we go.
I wish I could. Actually, I can. I'd have to set that up where I close that just for you, but not for the live chat, so they can all see me, but you can't.
Well.
I love this. This is really cool software. If you get into the advanced elements of it, I get into the advanced stuff just enough to really screw stuff up. That's sort of my like. I wonder what this button. Oh, maybe I shouldn't have pressed that. Then I get a message from Titan.
Don't press the big red button.
Yeah, and then I get these messages from Titan. It's like, Nick, why do you sound like a 13-year-old girl? It's like, I do? Like, yes, you do. It's just letting you know if that's your thing. But okay, I was just like, wow, okay. Must have screwed up something on the interface here, but all right. So,
unicorns and rainbows.
yeah, exactly. Anyways, but I feel bad because Isandring has a lot of pride, and there's a lot for conservatives to be proud about too, because there's a lot of times they've been absolutely 100% correct, and we have to have both parties. I'm a big believer in that. We should have three, but okay. But all that notwithstanding, it's just sort of like he's watching his own party implode, and I know how I'd feel if I was watching that. It's sort of like, on one level, I'd be okay because it'd be like, hey, I know I'm right and I stand by my values. But on the other level, it's sort of like, what happened to the other people who stood with me? That's what I was thinking. That's mostly what I thought of when John McCain died. I was just like, that's the end of that era.
Yeah, and there's some truth to that. I have several friends, ex-Navy friends, who, were Republicans, but we got along. We were good friends. We vacationed together sometimes. Everything was great. And I basically stopped any communication with them and vice versa since probably 2016, because something totally changed in the social dynamic in this country when that happened.
For me, I almost think that Obama's eulogy at McCain's funeral should be like required. You should be forced to see it in high school, because considering how much these two went at each other, but the two of them hated what was happening in this country now.
Yeah, well, I think I may have told you this, but it bears re-mentioning it here. Our local representative to Congress, when he first checked in as a freshman, I think he's on his third term now, could be fourth. Anyway, he had a bill that he really, really, really wanted to push through because it meant a lot to people in our district. It was the number one thing people in this district wanted done. So he went out and sought out a couple of Republicans to bring them on board as co-sponsors. And he, did his research, and, these are people who would benefit from this, their districts would benefit from this particular piece of legislation. And so he took the guy at a lunch, and they were talking, and he was explaining the bill, and the other guy says, "Look, I'm sorry. I really like you. You're a nice guy. I agree with you. This is a really good piece of legislation, and it would enormously help the people in my district. But I was sent to Washington not to pass legislation, but to block anything your party proposes. That's my job. If I try to co-sponsor a bill with you, my career is over completely, and I'll probably receive death threats for doing so. So I'm sorry, I can't help you on this, even though I agree that it's a great bill." And that's where we've descended to in this country. Is that everything is about obstructionism and stopping the other side from getting anything that it wants.
My father was a defense attorney, a criminal defense attorney. So, and some of the people he defended had, among the worst you could find in Massachusetts. And, but one of the things that he told me was, when he first started, his clients were never cuffed. The only guns that anybody had was the security guards, and the reality is they routinely let the suspects right next to the guards, or if they wanted to grab the gun, they could. But nobody ever did. Nobody ever thought of violence in a courthouse. No, it just didn't cross anybody's mind. There weren't metal detectors. There wasn't surrender your, a person, search, nothing. Nobody ever thought of taking a shot at a judge, ever. And you
Yeah.
know, it's
Welcome to 2023.
oh,
Not quite a daily event, but probably a monthly event.
yeah. Well, and now of course, you got to take a look at now. It's like, oh, let's and yeah, that's the other weird thing. I you say to yourself, I'm not going to lose friends over politics. Politics isn't, you know, more important than friendship, and we could say, and there is some truth to that. And I think that too many times, just like, oh well, if you voted Democrat or Republican, you know, politics shouldn't be that important. But there are cases where it is. I mean, if you're talking about, you know, slavery was a political issue, you know, so it's like you're either for or against it, and some of the issues are so important today that I'm sitting there going, I don't understand how you can. I lost a good friend because they were like, listen, nobody at January 6th would have done anything if it had been allowed to continue. It wasn't they, and this guy hasn't. He's not in white nationalist groups. He's not in the.
They were just tourists.
What? But well, it's not that he's a tourist, but he knows those kinds of guys and he likes them. So the first thing that he thinks is, well, listen, yeah, you know what? I've met them. They're stupid. They're all cock and balls and they do and say stupid shit. They're not bad people. They have families. I've met their children, which is actually kind of like the conversation that we had when we had on the former guy from, what was it? He was on Stormfront and he was also a member of, I forget which
nationalist groups.
Yeah, it was one of the major ones. So, and this guy, I don't think would ever become a white nationalist, but he had friends that were white nationalists, and there was no way to. I was like, the two of us see that reality. I was like, if they had found Mike Pence, and if he hadn't been defended by the Secret Service, he'd be dead. If they had found Nancy Pelosi, she would have met probably a rather gruesome death herself. Like, no, they wouldn't have done that. I was like, have you studied anything in history? I mean, anything. I mean, anything in history.
To say nothing of the fact that half of them admitted as much.
Yeah. Yeah. I either didn't know it at the time or forgot to make. Well, I was blown away because this is one of the smarter people I've ever met. This was a fucking smart guy, reasonably well educated. He dropped out early in high school. He was one of, you know, I don't need no schooling, but he was actually really bright and he was reasonably well self-educated. But I'm just sitting there going, no. And I said, look, all this stuff in history is like, no, the U.S. doesn't do that, and these people are honorable people, and all this. Yeah, it's like, yeah, the U.S. is made of human beings, the same as any other country. I wish we were that much better than France or Germany or all those others.
Here, Nick,
history.
That's some Kool-Aid.
Yeah, exactly. That's one reason, and I've also had friends too who try to give Germany a hard time for their history, and you know what, their history. The only difference really between German history and U.S. history is proximity. And the Germans, you know, their atrocities happen much sooner, but we certainly have a history of doing that kind of shit ourselves. So we hadn't perfected it. Okay, fine. All right. There's a couple questions in the live chat, so I'm gonna. I think one was directed at me and or you. So let me go look at that. But was there anything else that you were thinking of as we were? I get the thing for me was it's like it. I hate saying that. Listen, if you right now say you would vote for Trump again, you and I cannot be friends. And it's not because I'm pissed. It's not because like, oh, anybody who votes for Trump is an idiot. It's because he is such a fucking threat to this country. The fact. If you cannot see that fact, we are irreconcilable. I mean, we view reality in incommensurate ways.
Yeah. Let's see. I think it was a week ago. It might have been 2 weeks ago. I can't remember. But the whole Netanyahu thing. Amazing how quickly that fell off of the radar scope, and how quickly Israel decided it was going to initiate air and missile strikes into Palestinian territory. You know, pay no attention to the man behind the mirror.
And we said that. You actually. And by the way, I wanted to say I appreciated that. we covered, and we did it as breaking. We were one of the first live with what was happening in Israel. We covered that. I borrowed some lines from you, but I surround myself with people who teach me things, so I'm smarter because you're around. Don't ever tell anyone. We're going to clip that part out. In fact, okay, can we timestamp this? Hold on, I don't want this. I don't want. I'm speaking permanent records. I'm just going to get the timestamp here. Okay, so but you'd call me up afterwards, and I was very appreciative of that. Or you DM'd me and said that thought we'd done a good job with that coverage, and I was very proud of that coverage.
Yeah.
We don't get to do enough of those shows, and that was one of the things I love most about doing in time. But well, what we had said yeah.
Go ahead.
We had said then that what you can expect is, and I got this in. I already half knew it, but you had cemented this for me when we were talking about Taiwan. And, yes, I was aware that governments do distract, but I wasn't quite aware just how much or how, and you and I have been talking about Taiwan, how the Chinese were going to end up, it's just like, now do the Chinese have to rattle over Taiwan, because otherwise they're fucked. So I'm sitting there where we were talking about Israel. I was like, okay, so look for Israel to start bombing Palestine or somebody. I was like, well, there's going to be an incident. There has to be. Otherwise, Netanyahu is screwed. So, and then there it was.
4, 3, 2, 1. Boom. How did I do that?
And that was a little, when we covered it, we're like, okay, just FYI, we told you, and this isn't an I told you so, but for the people who are panicking and saying World War III, we told you this was going to happen because you have to understand the context. And I was, all right. So now somebody had said, okay, so there was a comment earlier, and I ignored it because I wasn't sure I understood it. I still don't understand it, but I think people have been asking enough about it. So Sweet 7433 said, I have a Starsky question for you to pursue. A Polish saying / proverb, ain't my money, ain't my circus, which I've heard that before. How would this be applied to the current situation in Russia, i.e. Russian soldier? And I'm not sure what that is. And okay, that's a good question to ask on the shills. So I don't know exactly what the question is. It sounds like it pertains to whether or not NATO and or the UN should be, the U.S. should be getting involved.
Well,
I don't know.
I'll start by saying I'm pretty certain it's not a Russian phrase. I think it's a damnable American phrase, but that's neither here nor there. The key is that in this case, it applies to a lot of different people. If people are not invested in the war personally, then it's easy for them to kind of just back away and pretend nothing's going on. And to some extent, we're seeing that, for example, with Germany, who has been reluctant to pony up all the stuff that other countries in the alliance have been doing to support the Ukrainians. And it's a question of, if you don't have anything really invested in it, and if you don't see a benefit to saying, okay, we're going to give them X number of billions of dollars in military hardware, which means that's X billion that doesn't get spent on social programs, which might impact us in an upcoming election, then that plays into this. And as I've said several times, the longer this war goes on, the more that dynamic is going to start affecting what's going on. Because as donor fatigue sets in among the West, the level of support for Ukraine is going to start falling off. And that has serious repercussions for their ability to prosecute the war.
Well, I think that's what Russia's trying to do, right? Is just wait out the clock, and because eventually everybody will move on.
Sure, right, and these leaked documents plays right into that, because it convinces gullible people that, oh, look, Ukraine has no chance of winning. Even our DOD says we can't win. So why are we sending, more money, good money after bad, to a losing cause? That's kind of what they're trying to do, I think.
I do think we should do the breakdown. So I think it was Peter 𝐓𝐢𝐻 had a video, and if I recall, it was actually on why Russia cannot win this and will ultimately must necessarily collapse. It's not just that Putin's going to be replaced by someone even worse. Russia has to collapse. It's a foregone conclusion. Which it's Peter 𝗓𝐻, so everything's a foregone conclusion. I mean, it's like you know. But somebody had asked us to do that one, and I may. Like I said, we are booked for a month. But I would like to do that one. But General Ben Hodges, who is the guy, we're going to be having him on, I think, May 2nd. He's, I spoke about him earlier. He was the commanding general of the U.S. Army in Europe, and he was the commando of NATO's Allied Land Command. And so he has been talking a lot about this stuff on Twitter, and I'm going to ask him about some of these things, one of them including that he seems to agree with 𝗓𝐻's view on this one, which is weird because I haven't found anybody who really is in the know who completely agrees with his view on it, because we've talked about it, but at any rate, he thinks Russia, the entire thing is going to collapse, and it's only a matter of time. So I'd be interested to see. We're going to ask him that on Tuesday, not this Tuesday, but when the show comes up. I'm looking forward to that. But,
yeah.
All right. Oh yeah. The other thing I wanted to say, and then I think we'll probably start wrapping it up. There is something to be said for pain being relative, and you know, people who have had a pretty cushy life still find ways to find suffering, and people who've had a really terrible life still tend to find ways to eke out joy out of those things. And human beings are remarkably adaptable creatures, and we adapt to our environment and can find suffering and happiness in almost any of them. I don't subscribe to the argument that the U.S. is made better by selling everything we have and giving it to everybody else and trying to bring everybody up to the same. I think we should be trying to bring everybody up to the same level, but I think we do that through free trade and economic practices, and I think any number of other things. I'm also aware that this is somewhat, a bias in favor of me, but I've talked with the because I wrote The Water Thief during the Wall Street, the 2%ers, going out and saying, well, the top 2% in the U.S. should give all their money to charity, and what was it called? Occupy Wall Street. Occupy Wall Street. Yeah. And which I did point out to them. I was just like, do you really think that the top 2% should give their money to those who are more needy, especially like people who are starving? And they said, yes, absolutely. I said, okay, great. When are you donating? And they're like, well, I'm not in the 2%. I was like, oh, yes, you are. Yes, you are. And here's why. The U.S. is the wealthiest country in the world. 50% of Americans, anybody making over $32,000 a year, is in the top 2% of the planet for wealth.
Yep.
And I haven't seen anybody sit down and, I haven't seen anybody in the middle class who says, well, the 2% should just, it's an awfully convenient 2%, I've noticed, but it always is, and that's fine.
Yeah.
All that notwithstanding, part of the reason I feel so strongly about helping Ukraine is because they're suffering, and they're a country that's trying to get their legs under them, and they're in a really bad spot. But having said that, there are a lot of countries that are suffering as well. But there's, I feel that about Ukraine, and I feel like as Americans, we have an obligation to help. So for me, that's sort of my biggest motivation. Let's put all of that down. Let's ignore all of that for a minute. The reality is, I don't think there's anybody who thinks Russia is going to stop there. Whether you've got 𝗓𝐻's view, anybody else's view, Russia isn't going to stop there. Even if it's just to get back all the old Soviet satellite states, even if they won't invade Poland, whatever the final line is, they're not going to stop there. And Russia is going to continue to be a threat, so us fighting a war with them is inevitable. Whether it's a proxy war through Ukraine or an actual war, one of us is going to have to take out the other in one way or another. Better to do it this way. So if you can't sit there, if you're sitting there going, we shouldn't be helping other people, and I just made a couple of arguments as to how and why that's okay. I can see that. That's tenable. I disagree, but I get it. But it is best for the U.S. and I think that's one reason. And I'd seen that you're going to know this better than me, but I'd seen recently somebody had done a piece on Biden doesn't give a shit about Ukraine, Ukrainians, anything like that. By fighting this war, it is basically the best thing that you could do for the U.S. It's one of the better things you could do for Europe, and just gave all of his list of reasons why, like, no, keep spending the money on it because the returns you're getting long term, and there is, and just having Ukraine as a stable ally that is appreciative and so many good reasons, put down all the morality and all this other stuff, which I think are good too, but even if you can't bring yourself to that, this is worth investing in. What are your thoughts?
I liken the current situation with Ukraine as Czechoslovakia in 1938. The Czechs did not want to give up the Sudetenland. It was their integral territory. But more importantly, all their defensive belts, their fortified areas, were in the area that they were going to have to surrender to placate the Germans. But when France and Britain said, oh, no, just give it to the Germans and we'll avoid World War II, everybody will be happy. And, less than a year later, ta-da, we're at war. I see what's going on with Ukraine as very similar, which is that if we don't back Ukraine as Britain and France should have backed Czechoslovakia in 1938, then in a year or two, we will be drawn inevitably into a shooting war with Russia when they try whatever the next thing is. It will happen. It's what authoritarian regimes do. They keep pushing the envelope as long as they think they can get away with it. So by supporting the Ukrainians, we're basically preserving lives of Western soldiers and potentially a lot of civilians, because there's a very, very definite risk that a hot war between NATO and Russia escalates into a bunch of glowing mushrooms.
Yeah. All right. So we had a question in the live chat. A lot of countries suffering like Ukraine. Seriously, no, they're suffering worse. A lot suffering worse than Ukraine. Off the top of my head, Uganda, Sierra Leone, Niger, Liberia, Ghana, Haiti, Rwanda. Basically, take the entire continent of Africa. There's a child that starves to death every 7 seconds. So in the period of time it took me to say all this, 2 children starved to death. Yes, there are plenty of countries that have it worse than Ukraine. Which is not, by the way, me trying to undermine what's wrong. You can't solve all of the world's problems, and all of us, I swear to God, and when I was a kid in high school, it was whack-a-mole. It was just like I want to help everybody, and if somebody said here's a charitable cause, here's a charitable cause, it was all of them. And what I realized was much more effective to specialize in one and to do your best for that one and let others pick the others, and don't even necessarily go for the one that has the highest need, because those are getting the people. Sorry.
Pick 1 or 2 that you know you're going to be able to succeed at and commit to making those successful.
Yes.
If you spread out your people and your money and your logistics to try to help everybody, nobody really gets helped at all.
Sanchez asked a very good question.
That's the key.
Am I saying a civil war is are you saying, oh no, actually wasn't asking me. All right, yeah, no, I'm just talking about other countries where you have civilians who are suffering and that presumably we can do something to help. So I'm if you listen to what I said in context, I was talking about Ukraine, and I said if I want to help Ukraine because they're suffering, well, there are a lot of countries that are suffering like right? And there are ones that are probably suffering worse that could also use help. So why Ukraine? And I think Commander McMillan just sort of put it. So I don't want to,
I think
all
we
try to help
chose Ukraine for two reasons. We chose Ukraine because A, it puts our thumb in the dike before the dike ruptures, and B, because it was something we could build consensus with most of our allies to deal with. Having personal experience with Somalia during the famine with Operation Restore Hope, we made this big deal we were going to go in and feed the starving Somalis. And we showed up, and one of the first things the Marines did when they landed is go into the warehouses, and the warehouses were full from floor to ceiling. You couldn't cram, a mouse in there with grain to feed the people. The warlords were holding all that food hostage because it was political power. That was the issue with Somalia. We had no chance of solving it because the basic groundwork for trying to succeed in that country wasn't there at the time. And it still isn't to this day. So again, it's all about picking countries where you can make a difference. And once that country becomes solid and established and is a reliable partner, then you move on to another one. I mean, go back 70 years, and if you told somebody that Japan and Germany would be among our closest allies in the world today, and they'd look at you like you were on drugs. But that's the reality. We chose countries that we could help. Conversely, Italy, we looked at Italy and said, they're quasi-allies because after they surrendered to the Allies, they contributed a significant number of troops to helping us expel the Germans from Italy. But Italian politics was such a colossal mess that I think, Marshall and the White House kind of looked at it and said, not today.
Well, and that's also in part that dovetails with the sweatshops argument that I was making, which is, people sit there and say, well, we should close sweatshops. Well, if you just go and close one, you actually haven't solved the problem that caused them to come up in the first place. In fact, you make those problems worse. So just diving in and saying either I'm going to throw money at the problem or just fix the problem by X, Y, and Z. Yeah, you have to get educated on it. And that the one that you were mentioning about, what you said, Mogadishu, was that it? With the grain,
Yes.
So there's a number of countries where they actually have enough food and people are still donating food. People are like, oh, they're starving to death, I'll donate food. Yeah, they're starving to death, but not because they don't have enough food. In some cases, it's because they can't get the food because of warlords or other internal things. In other cases, it's because there are no roads. They can't get the supplies that they need to the places that they need to in time, because you can't run a truck over it. You can maybe run a Jeep or some kind of off-road vehicle that can carry a few things. Can't be anything refrigerated. So that also leaves out any number of like COVID vaccines, any other kinds of medicines, stuff like this. So you can sit there and say, well, we're going to give them all these things. It'll help the people in the cities, but most of them already actually have it. It's the more rural ones. So you want to save lives, build roads, build infrastructure. Look who I'm talking to. It's Mr. Logistics over here.
Yeah, you'll notice that the Chinese kind of learned that lesson. They preface all their aid by, how about you let us build roads for you and bridges for you? You'll go into huge debt and be...
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how they
are friends forever.
They work both sides of that coin, don't they? They're like, well, our aid isn't going to help you if you don't have the roads, so we'll build the roads at a 3% discount. And since we know you don't have that kind of money, it'll just be about 40%. Do you know the word usury? No, perfect. Oh dear Lord.
Road.
All right.
But I mean that's the kind of game international politics is. And I think a lot of people in not just the U.S., but in the West in general, don't really take the time to try to understand and appreciate all the nuances about the countries that we want to support. All we need is the latest crisis du jour, and the news will run stories on it for a week, and everybody's up in arms. Oh, we have to go help the people whose backyard is on fire and the poor koalas are dying. Send, $1 billion to save the koalas. Yeah, that's nice, but are there better things we can do with that money?
Yeah. All right. Well, I think I'm going to call it. I know you're tired. I'm tired. We ended up. We're going to do a short show, and here we are with having been. It was a good one.
You and I get going. It's never short.
Yeah, I know. We both have a penchant for being. I have a saying. Never use a small word when a diminutive one would work. Wow, but it does help if you can actually say it. Diminutive, yeah. So just as a reminder, we have coming up on April 22nd is going to be our fundraiser for Ukraine. In time, normally, as a rule, we don't do fundraisers, and there's a number of reasons for this. There's a lot of reasons, and I think they're very good. We decided to make an exception in this case, but this is going also to the UN Refugee Relief Fund, and every super chat from that show will go to it. So I hope you guys will come, and we'll also be giving the Godless Mom made a really nice. We keep saying Afghan. It's not actually an Afghan because it's not quite wide enough to, I think, be one. But it would certainly. It would cover me, but it's not like a blanket. But we'll show it later. But she needed that. That was really nice. She'll be getting letters from Starsky and myself. So we hope people will come in and do that. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. And we also are going to have on then and in subsequent days for their own interviews, because they each do have a number of stories that we've just neglected to get to. So Anna from Ukraine, Anastasia, Starsky, of course, and General Ben Hodges, who is the former commanding general of the U.S. Army in Europe and the commander of NATO's allied land forces. So we'll be having him on. He isn't going to be at the fundraiser, but we're going to have him on ostensibly right now on the 2nd. And we're going to have a lot of questions for him. We're going to see if we can take up 2 hours of his time, because I think that's going to be a worthwhile one. So I hope you guys will join us for that. Like, subscribe. That really would help us out. Share also with people you think would like the show. Don't just drop those links anywhere, because you know what? If they ain't going to like the show, it ain't going to help. It ain't going to help them or us. You throw in the links. But if you got a friend who you think would like the show, pass it on. We'd love to have all the views we can get. We are now, I think, about 130 shy of 1,000 on this channel. So looking forward to getting that. I'm sure we'll get that soon. So that's great. And everybody's been a real help, which I appreciate. Lance, any final things before we go?
Not really. Good luck, and see you tomorrow.
All right. See you tomorrow. Thank you all for joining us, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern, when we have on Operator Starsky to once again talk about the current status of things in Ukraine. Have a good night, all.